John Kuzmich here in Denver, Colorado, reviewing a very particular book on trumpet pedagogy written by Adrian Griffin of Monterrey, Mexico, who is a principal trumpet player in what symphony?
The Orquesta Sinfónica de Monterrey.
And that is so romantic, I gotta have it again.
Okay. Orquesta Sinfónica de Monterrey.
And what makes me so pleased about this book, it is not just good for brass students, but particularly good for teachers who are not brass players and everybody in between. So without much ado, I think we need to see how colorful a book this really is. And I can't think of a better way to start than to listen to one of my favorite trumpet players, Wynton Marsalis.
Hi, my name is Adrian Griffin. I'm the author of the book Buzz to Brilliance, published by Oxford University Press in 2012. And today I'm going to be taking you through some of the chapters and explaining and playing some of the examples of the book. I hope you enjoy. Thanks a lot.
Now, looking at these four pictures, it looks like we're going to have quite an adventure. Am I right, Adrian?
Yes, John, you're actually right. These four pictures depict, the placement of the mouthpiece on the embouchure, dealing with things that students have to deal with in marching band. We're going to have some diagrams of how the tongue actually functions in the mouth, and taking the trumpet apart and cleaning it and putting it back together so it functions correctly.
Well, I can hardly wait because there are 18 very diverse chapters that will cover the riverfront for music educators.
So basically, what makes Buzz the Brilliance different? What we've done, or what I've done, is I've put this book in a modern language geared towards the actual student rather than the book that speaks solely to band directors. It's speaking directly to the students in a scholarly language for students that they can understand and get a lot of information from the text.
And likewise, it will educate band directors how to communicate with their students better.
Yes. Each chapter is broken down into topics like embouchure, breathing, articulation, warm up, warm down, to easy, understandable, and related stories and instructions from my own playing to stories of others in the profession. And
it will keep everybody well informed of what they need to learn and master.
That's right. The design is text-based rather than exercise-based, meaning there's going to be a lot of stories, there's going to be a lot of explanation, rather than just being exercises and the students figuring out how to do that and how they relate. That's kind of what sets Buzz to Brilliance different, is that the text guides the student from the very beginning all the way to the very end of the advanced part of the student.
And with 287 pages, you can't possibly say it's incomplete.
Yes, there's a lot. I have a lot of hot air to get out.
Now, this is a favorite part of the book. It says, do you have to have talent? And my quotient is, you got to have knowledge and functional information, whether you're the teacher or the student, and it really gives me focus.
Yeah, a lot of exercise books, etude books, pedagogical books. Sometimes there has to be a certain understanding before you can, books are broken down to beginner level, intermediate level, advanced level. This book is all in one. It's going to take you from the very beginning of taking your trumpet out of the case and how to put the mouthpiece in to really doing some advanced exercises in the back of the book.
Excellent.
Like I was saying before, Buzz to Brilliance is intended for the beginners through intermediate players in high school preparing to start auditioning for college.
You can't start too soon.
That's very true. Buzz to Brilliance makes a great supplement for band directors to have for their students in their beginning trumpet and brass classes because it can serve as a supplement to whatever books they're working out of with the ensemble. And it's currently a very popular book with many band classes throughout Texas, Iowa, and California.
And as a private teacher, for my students that are really interested, they find this an excellent book because it's very approachable.
And Buzz also makes a great book for brass method classes taught in universities because, students, again, even though they're at the university level, they're usually, for education majors, they're having to learn a secondary instrument. If you're a woodwind player, you're taking a brass methods class. And what it does is it takes that very approachable way to a beginner, but an adult beginner, either a comeback player later in life or in a brass methods class, and it breaks it down as a beginner level for them and takes them through. So they learn basically out of this book, and then they take that same learning progress and pass that to their students.
Very good. Now, with 18 chapters, this is going to be an adventure, like I said at the onset. And the first chapter obviously talks about the instrument itself.
Yeah, the first chapter is going to be Meet Your Trumpet, and I have students start on cornet or trumpet, and basically I start talking about everything about the trumpet from basically diagramming the trumpet and letting the students know what each part of it is, because sometimes they'll go into a private lesson and you'll be telling them, okay, put your mouthpiece into the lead pipe, and they'll say, well, I'm sorry, what's the lead pipe? So not only is it good to have a proper working knowledge of the trumpet, then you can add that to the playing knowledge as well.
Excellent.
Hi, and welcome to Chapter 1, Meet Your Trumpet. In this chapter, we're going to talk about all things trumpet and cornet. We're going to talk about everything from the mouthpiece and the different measurements of the mouthpiece and what mouthpiece could be good for you as a beginner, intermediate, or advanced player, or a comeback player. We're going to take apart the valves, and we're going to show you how to oil the valves correctly by placing the valves correctly into the casing. Believe it or not, there's a right way and wrong way to put the valves in, and that has to do with your valve guide, and we'll talk more about that in the chapter. We're going to talk also about how much oil to use, not too much, not too little, just to make it perfect. We're also going to talk about greasing the slides, so the slides move nice and easy and freely. Your first slide, and your tuning slide, and our third slide. We're going to talk about all the parts of the trumpet. You have a diagram for the cornet and trumpet. That's going to give you a label for everything, so you know that this is your first thumb hook, that this is your mouthpiece, this is your lead pipe, these are your valves or pistons, this is your pinky hook, this is the bell, this is the tuning slide. We're going to talk about everything. These are the bottom valve caps, these are your top valve caps. We're going to talk about everything. At the end of the chapter, we're going to give you a brief overview and a nice, concise history of the trumpet. It's not too lengthy, but it's not too short, but it's going to give you everything from the beginning of time up to now in a pretty short but beautifully written history of the trumpet. I hope you enjoy this chapter, Chapter 1, Meeting Your Trumpet. Thank you so much.
Well, looks are deceiving, and I'm assuming that your description that you have on your video clip will bring this up into reality.
Hi, welcome to Chapter 2, Posture and Hand Placement. In this chapter, it's pretty obvious. We're going to be talking about posture while standing, posture while sitting. The book gives great detail and great narrative of how to have your student achieve this. It also is going to talk about your hand placement and the student's hand placement. It's going to be, basically, there is a right and wrong way to hold your instrument so it's the most comfortable yet most effective way. Everything from the right hand, either in the hook or on top of the hook, your pads of your fingers on top of the pistons, and your left hand, and how it functions with the slides, and where to put your pinky exactly. So this is what's going to be covered in Chapter 2. I will later cover more about sitting and standing in our posture.
Well, where all the problems start.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about Chapter 3 now. And you will learn how to, the student's going to learn how to set their embouchure, what to look for to make sure it's correct, and how to adjust their embouchure on their face so that it will work with their lips and teeth characteristics.
Hi, Chapter 3, Embouchure and Mouthpiece Placement on the Embouchure. This is what we're going to be discussing in Chapter 3. And again, there is a right and wrong way, a correct and incorrect way to place the mouthpiece on the face. We don't want our students doing anything like this, too high, too low, too left, too right. So the book will talk in depth about where to place the mouthpiece according to the student's teeth, the parameters of how to function that embouchure with the function of the teeth as well. And we will also discuss the function of the embouchure itself, the muscles, what it's needed to play the mouthpiece, and the correct hand placement as far as buzzing the mouthpiece. I don't like to use the entire hand for the mouthpiece because you can use too much force while buzzing the mouthpiece. So what I like to do is I like to have my students use their non-dominant hand. For me, that's my right hand because I'm left-handed. And I place the thumb on the bottom and the first two fingers on top. That will create a minimal amount of pressure, but yet still provide a nice buzz. If the student, non-experienced of course, beginner or intermediate, uses the whole hand and tries to push it into the mouth, the embouchure becomes spread, it becomes too much pressure, the blood flow is limited, and then we start to come into some serious problems in creating a nice sound. So check out Chapter 3. It's going to really do your students some good.
Well,
Here we're going to start talking about some of the basics of the trumpet, what to expect as they start playing on the trumpet, and learning which notes and the notes as they come, and the emptying of the water key. Something as basic as that. There's a right way and wrong way to do that, as blowing the air through the trumpet.
excellent.
Welcome to Chapter 4, entitled The Basics of Trumpet. And in this chapter, we basically are going to discuss the functions of the slides as far as tuning. We're going to be talking about how to properly let the water out of the trumpet. So a lot of students don't understand the fact of placing the lips over the mouthpiece and opening the water key and letting the water out of the trumpet. Many of them try to buzz into the trumpet, and they get a very big surprise from the bell and to their colleagues and band directors of this tremendous sound when they're just trying to let the water out silently. So it's very important for the students to put their mouth around the mouthpiece rim and blow at a very good fast rate of air to remove the water from the main tuning slide and lead pipe. Now also they need to compress the valves by pressing all three down, and then again blowing and letting the water out. This removes the water from all the first, second, and third slide as well. Why we want to do this is because if they don't do this, they will have a gurgling sound in their trumpet from the excess water building up. And two is when the students put the instrument away, they need to remove as much water from the instrument as they can. The trumpet is not a petri dish. We do not want bacteria, and we do not want things building up, crawling around inside the trumpet while it's in its case before its next playing time. So we want to try to remove as much water as we can by blowing out, taking the slides out, emptying the water that we can, being very careful when we do this not to drop any of the parts of the trumpet. And we're also going to discuss about how to find a private teacher, about it takes two to tango, you might say, It takes two people to really help develop the musician. It takes a mentor to help a student develop through this progress of playing the trumpet. The more you practice, the better you sound, the better the sound, the more you love to play. That's really what we're going to talk about in Chapter 4.
Amen.
Well, right here we have a great chapter, a chapter that every student and private lesson teacher needs to work with their students on, and that's breathing in Chapter 5. The students have been breathing, for years, but blowing into a trumpet adds a whole new challenge, a certain way of blowing the air through the horn. Playing the trumpet will take your breathing into a whole new dimension, and this chapter is really, really designed to give a very informative view of how to do this correctly.
A work in progress for all students and all teachers.
Chapter 5, Breathing. This is a chapter I hold very near and dear to my heart in this book. Breathing is to the trumpet as gasoline is to a car. You need it to make use of that specific instrument, whether the trumpet or the car. This chapter is full of detail about exactly how to breathe, exactly the functions of the muscles that are needed for breathing, and understanding a better use of the diaphragm. A quick example for this chapter is when people talk about breathing from the diaphragm, it makes absolutely no physiological sense to say breathe from the diaphragm or the stomach. The diaphragm is a sheath of muscle that separates your upper torso from your lower intestines. And when you breathe, the diaphragm moves down the intestines in order to expand enough room in your thorax or chest area for your lungs to inflate. This is the use of the diaphragm. Period. There is no breathing from the diaphragm. There is no breathing from the stomach. This is the use of the diaphragm. You will find more things in Chapter 5, breathing, along the lines of these topics. Learning to breathe correctly on a wind instrument is vital, and Chapter 5 is going to help your students immensely.
Well, after we learn to breathe and we're making a sound, we're moving right on to articulation in Chapter 6. And trumpeters are famous for their feats of articulation. Listening to Wynton Marsalis playing his Carnival album, the Carnival of Venice, and some really outstanding features of his articulation can be displayed through that album. And learning the skill correctly for the first time, it's very important for the students to develop a clear and crisp articulation that will continue to help along as they get their speed going.
No question about it. It is a difficult synopsis when the airstream and the articulations are not coordinated.
That's very true.
Chapter 6, Articulation. In this chapter, we're going to be discussing the usage of the tongue. The tongue placement in single tonguing, the tongue placement in double tonguing, and the tongue placement in triple tonguing. All of these three various ways of tonguing are explained in great detail in Chapter 6. The tonguing of the trumpet needs to be very clear, precise, and brilliant. It can never be muddled or dirty. Just like in the diction of when we speak, it has to be clear and not boggled. The clearer we pronounce the articulation or the syllable use of our articulation, the cleaner and more brilliant will stand out in our articulation for the trumpet.
Maybe
Well,
one of
some
the
of the-
maybe
Go ahead,
one
John.
of maybe one of the areas that really disturbs me is that band directors don't have a clear understanding of how to warm up their brass players, how to have them cool down, and it is an area that needs to be well understood by all teachers, regardless of being a brass performer or not.
Well, clearly, because most students, when they're coming from another class, they have 10 minutes to get to class. And in that 10 minutes, they talk to their friends and wander through the halls, and they get to class, get their trumpet out, or whatever instrument it is they're playing. And within seconds, they're into what they're doing. And there's literally no warm-up time involved. Now, some band programs will take the full ensemble through a warm-up, but it's a general ensemble warm-up based on sound and cohesion of the band, not so much warming the face up and the muscles of each individual instrumentalist to do this. So the warm-up and warm-down that I explain in this chapter, how to do it, when to do it before school, in a class period you have off before band is very vital.
Very important, I might add.
Okay, so after my rigorous practice session, being whatever I needed to do it for the day, orchestral music, band music, solos, ensembles, whatever it is I'm doing, it's been strenuous. So my lips, my embouchure, the muscles are tight. So I need to release that tension in order for the next day when I pick up my instrument, my lips are not still tense. If I stop playing immediately after my practice session, put my trumpet in the case, when I come back, my lips are going to feel the same way as they did right before I put them away. Tense. That's going to create a sound that we don't want. The tense, little tiny, tight sound. So as I warm down, I like to say I'm warming down in the low range, on low C and below, with either long tones in a quiet dynamic, or doing chromatic scales in the low range, C to low F sharp, slowly, fastly, letting my lips vibrate freely with no tension, and allowing my lips to relax and release the tension. Down to low F sharp, and I'll start to feel a little tingling in my lips, the blood, the sensation coming back to them. After I feel a little bit of that, I'll start to do some chromatics. Exercises each for about 30 seconds, 45 seconds. I can really feel the lips, the muscles releasing the tension and starting to be really tingly, the blood coming back to them. Once I've done that, I'm good to put my instrument away for the day and wait for tomorrow to start my new warm-up.
Well, every student has their own interpretation of what practicing is. As teachers, as private teachers, as professionals, as students, we all have what we think is what we're doing best. And what I've tried to describe in Practice Laying the Foundation in Chapter 8 is what is needed from each practice session, from, of course, the warm-up and warm-down, to the fundamentals, to the listening skills, to the basics of playing. So I break down into this chart, this photo that you see on this PowerPoint, and I give an equal amount of rest, and I give a timeline of how much each student should be practicing each one. And I do a beginner, intermediate, and advanced one in the book as well.
I find this very thorough in covering the concept of perfect practice doesn't happen by accident. And you really have to think out what you need to accomplish, and your outline here is very comprehensive, and it gives fuel for thought in everything that needs to be mastered, and I find this an excellent presentation, which is followed through in the book magnificently.
Well, thank you, John. Also, what this
Welcome
does...
to Chapter 8, Practicing, Laying the Foundation. In this chapter, I talk about many different aspects of practicing. I like to think of practicing as practicing with purpose. And every practice session has to have a purpose of something that your student wants to achieve. I like to set goals for my students, achievable goals and goals in the long distance that they can chip away at each day. I have them follow a practice sheet with a way to warm up, solos to practice, etudes to practice, tonguing patterns to practice, rhythm patterns to practice, along with listening examples and recording themselves. I like to think of if a student practices badly, they'll play badly. If you practice good, you'll have a better chance of playing good. So I try to have them always practice the correct way, and teachers need to be very specific in teaching their students how to practice correctly. Practice in small bits, not large bits, meaning take small sections and perfect them as much as possible. Don't worry about the global scene of the piece just yet. Make each little small aspect as good as possible. Once that's mastered, move on to adding a little bit more to that small chunk. Adding on, adding on, adding on, till you get more and more and more till you have the global scene of what you're looking at. You started small, you're ending big. Small, small, small at first, equaling the larger parts at the end. I like to have my students record themselves in their practice sessions, even beginners. Oftentimes, what they hear themselves doing is not exactly what they're really doing in real life. And that works as myself as well as a professional. I record myself and go back and listen and say, oh, I really thought I was doing that. And I wasn't. The recording devices don't lie, and they're somewhat what I like to call a truth detector. So use them and use them well. Something else I like to use, two other tools, a metronome and a tuner. I call these lie detector tools as well. They're not friendly, but they will keep you honest. They will keep the students honest. Use them every practice session, the metronome and the tuner. Be attuned to using your aids and your devices to helping have a better practice session.
Now, I kind of cut you off when I went into this video clip and you were going to interject something. What was it that you wanted to say?
I was going to say there's a famous phrase that people like to use that practice makes perfect. And it does, as long as you're practicing perfectly. I always like to use the phrase practice with purpose or practice makes permanent. And by saying practice makes permanent means if you're practicing wrong, you're going to keep playing wrong because you're permanently demonstrating this to yourself and learning that habit of practicing wrongly. So by practicing as skillfully as you can, you're really going to see a big difference in the practice sessions.
Well, I don't think there's a more difficult topic to cover than practicing, because you're supposed to take all the technique, all the theory, everything, and you're supposed to progressively get better. And the reality is it doesn't always work that way. And I find your book a very vital tool for giving the students perspective at every juncture of practicing. So this is why I put on the webcams, because I think we have a heart-to-heart talk here, that this is serious, and sometimes all we want is techniques and tricks to becoming a better musician. And the point is, we got to earn our salt. We have to work. I don't know of an easy way, but I know there's a smarter way.
Right. I like to always think of, musicality versus technical ability. And a student can have all the technical ability in the world, but musicality is not necessarily going to follow that. But if you reverse that and have a tremendous amount of musicality, technique has no other choice but to follow musicality.
You're absolutely right. Now we're into chapter 9 here, and I can see that every trumpet player wants to exceed the laws of gravity.
Oh yes, they all want to play higher, louder, and faster, and extending the range requires building excellent embouchure strength and control. So there's a fundamental building block where we got to start, and there's a goal at the end, but there's a proper way to get there.
Welcome to Chapter 9, Strength and Endurance. This is everything a trumpet player always wants to learn. How to get better strength, to play in the higher and low range, and how to have more endurance to last forever. Well, by endurance, we can do several different things. We could play long tones with nose breaths, playing etudes from top to bottom over and over, building the muscle, exercising the muscle over and over as much as possible without breaking it down. Lip slurs, the flexibility of moving the embouchure, and lip bends, as we discussed before, can also be used as lip strength with flexing the lip down and back. Strength comes from I don't know what.
That video seems to be not quite finished there, John.
Well, why don't you reiterate what's missing here so they will be enticed to go to that chapter?
Well, like we're talking about in chapter 9, building strength. Strength comes from doing lots of long tones, lots of lip flexibilities, and lip slurs, and slowly building the strength in our corners and building the strength in our embouchure so that you have the correct physical ability to play as high as you want, as low as you want, and for as long as you want.
Well, I found your text excellent for providing the tools. So it's not like you are preaching, you are teaching how to do that, and that's what I got out of perusing your book. Now in chapter 10, you never stop working with your ears and your lips. Anything here that needs to be expounded upon?
It's just all about putting it all together. Your articulation, your sound, letting the embouchure relax and be easy. And as you can see from the image, we have a half note followed by a half note followed by a 2-beat rest followed by a whole note. And that's from the very beginning playing a perfectly beautiful note, reiterating that perfect note, and then, oops, there's silence. And then after that 2 beats of silence, letting the muscles come right back to coming back to playing that note perfectly as possible. And that comes from muscle memory, and that's why we have the rest in there. We have the note, the repetition of the note, a rest, and then recalling the muscle memory immediately to play that beautiful note again.
I like that concept. You have to have continuity, and rest is the factor that validates if you are really in control.
This is very true. The chapter 11, we're talking about playing in the extremes and training your embouchure to achieve the accuracy control from loud to soft playing. There's many more other things covered in this chapter, but from this example that I have here, by having great articulation and developing that through the written text I've talked about, we'll start the note at piano and we'll crescendo the sound in a solid form of sound until it reaches fortissimo, and then decrescendos back to piano. That builds the student's idea of actually what piano is to the extreme of fortissimo back to pianissimo. So they have a global idea of the sound and the dynamics that they're able to play within. Because most students, when they're practicing, play within mezzo forte to forte. They're not taking advantage of the quietness that they can play and the extremities of the loudness that they can play. So these little exercises build and having a greater paint palette that they can use to paint their musical scene with.
Excellent, and I might add the word flexibility.
Yes, that's a very good word for that.
Chapter 11, Playing in the Extremes. As a musician, we want to be able to play our softest softs and our loudest louds. But most of the time we sit and practice mezzo forte over and over and over and become a master of practicing mezzo forte. What we need to realize is we have to practice our extremes. We can do this in our warm-up, we can do this during our practice session, and we can do this in our warm-down. And certainly we want to do it during our performances. A great exercise is playing a long tone. Start with perfect articulation at pianissimo. Slowly crescendo for 4 beats until you reach fortissimo. At the point you reach fortissimo, turn right back around and go back decrescendoing to pianissimo. And once you reach pianissimo, cut the air with the breath and let the sound fill the room. This is what you're going to get when playing in extremes. You're going to learn to play soft and learn to play loud in a musical context.
Well, John, here in Chapter 12, we're going to talk about trumpets and mouthpieces. All kinds of trumpets, everything from the B-flat trumpet or cornet they're going to start on, to C trumpets, E-flat trumpets, D trumpets, piccolo trumpets, flugelhorns, and rotary trumpets. We're going to explore everything that a trumpet player could ever want to know about trumpets and also mouthpieces. For example, the beginner might be starting on a 7C or equivalent, and they might be ready to move on to a bigger mouthpiece, something that's going to give them a more robust sound. And how are they going to do that? We're going to talk about exactly how to do that and how to try out mouthpieces, how to find a rim that's comfortable, a cup that's comfortable, and a mouthpiece that works for their overall performance and things needed at school and for auditions and future endeavors. Everything according to trumpets and mouthpieces are going to be explained right here in Chapter 12.
Well, I could do this whole clinic on mouthpieces because that's a very personal thing. And I think what you just talked about, the depth, the rim, and these things, there is no one solution for everybody because everybody's got different lips. So, bravo.
Chapter 12, Trumpets and Mouthpieces. This is every trumpet geek's fantasy. We're going to talk about all the different kinds of trumpets there are. C trumpets, E-flat trumpets, flugelhorns. We're going to talk about cornets. We're going to talk about piccolo trumpets. We're going to talk about the mouthpiece. We're going to take apart the mouthpiece and talk about the cup of the mouthpiece, the rim of the mouthpiece, the shank of the mouthpiece, and how it all fits together. How to test mouthpieces. What mouthpiece is good for you? How does it function? How do you test a mouthpiece? We're going to talk about all this in Chapter 12 and much, much more. Chapter 12 is loaded with everything you want to know about mouthpieces and trumpets from top to bottom.
Well, adjusting the braces is one of the hardest concepts I've ever had to deal with as a private teacher. I can't say enough about the difficulties that students go through. These tips in this chapter are going to help the transition to braces with minimal discomfort and adjustments. There's all kinds of different apparatuses that they can put on their braces to help make the pain less. But in my own opinion as a professional, they need to not use anything, even though there are aids out there, and just fight through the pain because it will build scar tissue, and the scar tissue will help pad the lips against the braces after time.
Well, it's an interesting dilemma because when the student gets adjusted to the braces and eventually they come off, it begins another saga in their adventure as a brass player. So it's something that you have to be aware of, and you certainly have to live through it, as you said.
Chapter 13, Braces. Braces is a very difficult and hard conversation to have with a student of a brass instrument. With the pressure of the mouthpiece against the lips, the pressure of the lips against the teeth with the brackets installed creates a lot of pain. Bottom line, how do you get through this? Is you have to have a tough upper lip. You have to build the endurance and the pain levels up. There are several different ways of creating a softer impact for the lips against the teeth, as far as denture cushions, wax. Some people put paper, which dissolves and is not a good idea. A Morgan bumper and also a brace guard are two very different things that strap onto the braces to create a softer foundation for the lips against the teeth. However, these create more distance of the lips away from the teeth, creating it even harder to play with braces. So what's my final advice and quick advice about braces? Don't use anything. Just play through the pain. They will bleed, they will scab, and they will create scar tissue. And the scar tissue will eventually become back to regular tissue. and you will be playing with the scar tissue, but it will heal, and the pain will slowly subside over time. So what to do when you have braces is tough it up. It's not the best thing to have when playing a brass instrument, but if you do have them, get a tough upper lip because you're going to need it.
One thing that I've done with my brass students when their lips are irritated is to tell them to rinse their mouth out with table salt and water. Not the most pleasant experience, but it's the only thing that will heal wounds inside your mouth efficiently and quickly. So it may not be as professional as using a mouthwash, but it's the trick of the trade to maintain health within your mouth.
Also, hydrogen peroxide works as well.
Excellent. Now, sight reading is the weakness of music programs for many reasons. What is your magical synopsis on sight reading?
Well, it's pretty simple. They just need to sight read something different that they've never seen every single day. Go to your school library, music library, if they have one. Check out a book, any etude book for any instrument, and just read it. Preferably, a trumpet etude book if they have one, but if they don't have many, or you've gone through all of them, check out a different instrument, French horn, flute, clarinet, and read. Just read. Never read the same thing twice. Every day, read a new etude, top to bottom, no matter how good or bad it sounds. Just read from the very first get-go to the very end. Every day, something new, and it will improve, guaranteed.
Chapter 14, Sight Reading. What do you do to become a better sight reader? Well, the answer is pretty simple. Sight read every single day. Open up a book, read it from beginning to end without stopping at all the music. All the good, bad notes, all the good and bad dynamics, play it all. Just practice it starting from beginning to end without stopping. After several months, you're going to notice yourself becoming a better sight reader. You're going to be able to sight read faster. You're going to be able to be more accurate with executing each note, each phrase, each complete song that you're playing. So bottom line is when you're sight reading and you're trying to sight read better, always sight read every single day. For myself, I like to sight read at the end of my practice sessions. I'll just open up one of my etude books and play an etude from top to bottom, go back and keep score and see what I did right and what I did wrong. See the things I really liked and see the things that I didn't do so good that the next day when I sight read, I really want to incorporate into my playing. Sight read every day is the suggestion of becoming a better sight reader.
Well, chapter 15, we're going to talk about performance and audition success, and basically we're going to talk about breaking everything down, long-term preparation, setting a timeline of how to practice. We're going to talk about being cool under extreme conditions. We're going to be talking about how to prepare your audition music. We're going to talk about the day before the performance, the month before the performance, 2 weeks before the performance, and calming techniques for the performer as well. We're going to talk about everything that's needed to keep the student relaxed and chill before they go in and play.
You sound like a personal trainer.
It really is what it is. It's a competition, and you want to be at your peak level, and this book is going to get you there step by step.
I really appreciate that.
And now we're in the marching band monster, I like to call it. It's not really a monster, but some of my students come into class after they've been in marching band, and they are just defeated. They're tired, they're sore, they're exhausted, and basically we're going to talk about how to get through the marching band season, how to maintain good form in playing when you're being asked to run across a field at 180 beats per minute playing 16th notes, and trying to keep a good sound. All of that starts to wear down after time, and there's techniques that I talk about in the book about how to do that. And mainly, also we're talking about warming up and warming down during this season as well, because that really is the sustenance that maintains the student through this, a good warm up and warm down, but also ways to practice, and having a good attitude, and ways to approach marching band, not so much different from concert band in playing. There shouldn't be a really big difference in playing. Physical aspect, yes, but the musical aspect needs to be 100% the same.
Well, I like your comment about warming up and warming down or cooling down, because some rehearsals can really go to what I call the extreme, and you have to know how to walk away from those rehearsals with enough chops for the next time you pick up the trumpet. And it takes a little bit of loving care on the band director and the student to figure out when you have reached your limit or how to maintain what you're doing.
This is very, very, very true.
Well, you've done a good job of dissecting the trumpet.
Yeah, I mean, in this chapter 17, trumpet care and repair, some school programs take the individual instruments and tell them how to properly take them apart, how to clean them, and some of them don't. And that's not really anyone's fault, because maybe they don't understand once it's apart how to get it back together. So basically, I'm going to tell you how to bathe your trumpet. What should get wet, what should not get wet, what a snake is, what a mouthpiece brush is, what the pipes, what pipes to clean, what pipes to grease, how to clean everything perfectly nice and easy, not using polish where it doesn't need to go. Basically, just putting your trumpet back together once it's apart, putting the valve guides in the right way so they're facing a certain direction, so that the valve ports line up so the students can make a sound on their trumpet again once it's apart. And it wouldn't be the first time that I've seen a trumpet player come to class with me and be like, hey, I took my trumpet apart tonight after only having it a couple days, and I can't seem to quite put it back together. It doesn't seem to play right. And they actually sometimes bring it in a bag. And it is horrific. So I started thinking about, well, what can I do to better do this instead of doing it for each individual student? I wrote a chapter for my book and about how to do it with pictures and diagrams of how to properly do it and make sure that it's done the right way and the professional way as well.
Well, one thing I know is when the slides are stuck, you've got to use brain power on how to get it unstuck, or take it to your local music store, because you could do damage.
Yeah, if the valve is stuck or the slide is stuck, stop. Don't let Dad go to the garage and get pliers and a hammer and a screwdriver. Nothing. If it's broke, stop. Take it to the music repairman, or if there's not one in your town, take it to your band director. They should know what to do and how to get it out. Most commonly, problem is stuck mouthpiece. There's a mouthpiece puller. It's not pliers.
Very good.
And in our last chapter here in Musical Destinations, it's about knowing what you're aiming for and keeping yourself inspired and helping find your way to get there. And we're going to talk about everything from, you're a fine trumpet player, but you don't know if you have what it takes to be a player in college. Or we're going to talk about the different options there are for studying music, and whether it's performance, education, arts management, or sound engineering, including recording. There's other things involved in music other than either being a teacher or a player. And the student really has to feel that out and know what their heart and soul is telling them that they want to do, and not having pressure put by parents, or not having to either pursue music or not pursue music. And the same for the band director, letting the students decide for themselves where their heart and soul is in this. And everything from being a band director to a player sound engineering and recording, which is a very exciting and popular field right now. And there's a lot that goes on, and a student really has to find their place and where they fit in the musical world. What really turns them on, you might say, about playing, about teaching, and what goes hand in hand with those ideas.
Well, you've addressed it several times. To record your practice sessions, to record yourself periodically, is not an egotistical thing. It's an honest assessment of where you're going and where you need to pick up some fine tools of adjustment.
Oh yeah, I mean, in our everyday practice as a student, especially, and well, especially for professionals, on my music stand every day is a tuner, a metronome, and a recording device. And before each performance, and I'm listening to myself up to the concert day. Whether it's in my home practice session or I'm setting a recording device on my stand at work, just kind of getting a general idea and balance, or I'll have somebody go out and listen to myself in the hall to see how the balance of the brass section is compared to the woodwinds and strings. But as a student and you're sitting at home and you're playing hot cross buns and you think you're sounding wonderful, record yourself and see how wonderful you actually really sound, how clear the articulations are, how beautiful the sound is. Because a lot of time what we hear in our head is what we want to hear. Just like through dialogue or when we're reading, we'll hear what we want to hear, or we'll read what we want to read. And having those three things are not easy. I like to call them the lie detectors. You think you're playing something in time, and you'll put that metronome on, and you're like, oh, I'm just not getting there. There's several things that are missing from my performance. And then, oh well, this G on top of the staff, I'm sure I'm playing that in tune, even though in reality you're playing at 25 cents sharp. You have to know to be able to bring that note down. And in the book, I give the tendency notes of every note, what every note tends to be sharp, what note tends to be flat, what notes can be adjusted with your movable slides, first and third, and what notes can't be moved when you're playing an open note, how to lip it up and how to lip it down.
Well, you made a real good point, and I think I want to look at each other eye to eye. When I was watching you do the warm-ups, it wasn't the cool down, but your third slide adjustment was constant. It was motion. It wasn't like only for long tones. It was an appendage that moved almost as if it was an automatic pilot. So there are so many tricks in your book and so many techniques covered. Is there anything that we should expound upon just so that there's closure here, that this book can be a difference maker, not just another book? When we go to the last slide, we will see, well, on the Oxford University Press website for your book, you've got personal endorsements from literally almost all, well, I won't say all, but most of the prominent performers in the world, and you have accumulated some kudos here in your career. Maybe this is a point to brag about yourself a little bit, who you are, because they know your name, they know where you are working now, but is there anything you'd like to summarize to show that you are an educator, a performer, and whatever combination that makes you well defined for writing this book?
Well, I have been through all of it. I've been a student, and I've been a professional, and I am a professional. And I think that there's always a unique link between each individual musician of how they were a student and how they were a professional, and everyone has their own story of how they got there. And this book is a musical destination of how I started as a beginner and how I've got to the professional level of playing. And it mainly revolves around the basics of music: sound, intonation, articulation, intonation. I think I said intonation already, and style and rhythm. Those five things. And when you put those five things together, they create a musical sense. And it's taken me a long time to put all that together, coming from a student to a professional. And I've had some of the best teachers in the world, and I'm so flattered by so many of my colleagues in the top universities and conservatories and orchestras around the world to endorse this book and to use this book with their professional, with their students at the beginner level to the intermediate level, and it helps. It helps give them a sense of a path, of a direction to go, a road to walk down, a musical destination, as you might say. The book is not an exercise book. The book is not a literary book. It's both combined into guiding that person. If they start to stray a little left, it pulls them back to the right. If they're a little right, it pulls them back to the left. It keeps them focused from everything that they're doing and playing and learning and dealing with frustration, dealing with braces, dealing with summer vacations, how to balance those things. All the things I deal with when my wife wants to go on vacation to San Francisco for 2 weeks. What am I going to do? You know, I've got to practice, but I've also got to have a life as well. And students have the same things. Hey, we're going to go to New York for 2 weeks. Well, they can't take 2 weeks of break right before an all-state audition. What do they do? How do they deal with that? So the experiences I have in my real life as a professional orchestral and solo trumpet player is exactly the same things that students deal with, but on a different scale. But it's the exact same experiences, it's the exact same activities that we both deal with.
I might add that there are a wealth of exercises to play. This is not necessarily a textbook that will take you from point A to point B, but it takes you to point C. You're going to have to use the techniques, the tools, and that's why at 286 pages, I find it a combination or a comprehensive book that will be more than just another book.
And the exercises are labeled as either a cornerstone, meaning that is something that is needed, that has to happen in your everyday practice, and also labeled as beginner, intermediate, and advanced. So the student's just not picking through the exercises and choosing something to play. When they choose something to play, they know it's either a beginner exercise, an intermediate exercise, or an advanced exercise. So they're not getting in too deep or spending time with something that they shouldn't be practicing.
Excellent. Now, in summary, I think we've pretty much covered why this book is important to band directors. Is there anything else before we go to the final slide?
I really don't. I think, using this book and getting feedback from the teachers in the schools that are using this in the different school districts, it is just a valuable book that they find that they can go to speak about cleaning the instrument, to speak about different exercises as a supplement to the exercises that they're using in beginner class, okay, well, we're preparing for auditions. Everyone open your books to this page, and we're going to talk about how Adrian says we prepare for this. It's a supplement. If it's not answered in class or if it's not known by somebody, it's in this book. A lot of the lore that's passed down from teacher to student is in this book, because I found myself saying, well, how do you properly clean an instrument, a trumpet? And I looked through all the textbooks and method books, and there's nothing out there. It's just your teacher tells you, okay, take this out, put this back in, make sure this doesn't happen. If you have any problems, just bring it in tomorrow and I'll fix it. That's not really the end-all, be-all to the answer. That's not really the correct answer at all. There needed to be a link between the student and the real life, and this book fills that.
Well said. Now, this you might call the sales pitch, but I see a 30% discount when you check out from the Oxford University Press website when you do an order, and it's there. And for obvious reasons, let's go, because there's more on the website for Oxford University Press for your book than just to get a discount.
That's true. There's the website that they have is I'm very thankful for them for designing a great website for the book. It outlays pretty much everything that you need to know about the book. It gives you some examples. It tells you the history about me, the endorsements, some reviews, and lays out the chapters, chapter by chapter.
Well, here's the overview. They can read because it will take them there. The website, I can't quote, but the point is if they search for the title of the book on the Oxford University Press, they'll find it. But here we go. You've got a good description, short, but look at the table of contents. You've got all these chapters, and you've got what we have done, but now you have it in written format, and I think it's just a good synopsis, this website. And if you look at the additional resources that we have not covered in this presentation, it is a book in itself. So
yes,
I think
there are so many appendix and so many other hidden gems in this book that it would take many, many, many interviews for us to break down and talk about every special little feature, as we call it in the book, that we have.
And of course, last but not least, here you are in living color. You are an artist clinician for Kahn, Selmer, and Bach trumpets. Not bad. And where you've taught before, and I'm sure there's more credits that are not there. But here's the other side that they need to look. When we mentioned this book has been endorsed by a number of outstanding performers, we weren't kidding. And this is some of them. I mean, the Metropolitan Opera, Cincinnati Symphony, Chicago Symphony. I mean, if I keep talking, you're going to think I'm bragging about your book. But the
I'm
point
very
is,
humbled by my colleagues really, really loving this book. And the thing is that it doesn't sit on their shelf. They use this book with their students, and they recommend it to their students to use for their students. It is really, really humbling, and I'm very, very lucky to have so many people really loving this book and using it. And that's the thing. It's not a book to sit on the bookshelf. It's a book to be in a backpack. It's a book to sit on the music stand. It's a book to have open and using every single day, because it really does change the way we teach beginning trumpet.
well, the best thing I can say is amen.
Well, thank you very much.
And I'm not going to go to the Amazon website that they can order it on, because I think this 30% discount can be choice, whatever it is. The only reason you'd go there is that it'll have another description of your book, but not nearly as thorough of what Oxford University. So without much ado, here we are. We started together, we ended together, and all I can say is you have done an exceptional job for beginning and intermediate level players in particular, and I think your closing words should be to the point of why beginning and intermediate players need to have a book like this, because without it, we have problems.
Yes, that's true. This book really closes the gap with beginner and intermediate trumpet players. It helps them get to the next level. And not only does it help the students, it helps the teachers, because the teachers now have a written reference in text and in exercises of how to make their students get to the next level. And when used, they do pass to the next level.
Well, good luck with your book and subsequent professional engagements, books, etc. And it's been a pleasure working with you, Adrian.
Well, thank you very much, John, and it's been all my pleasure.
Till next time.